come to work, so my peoples come first. I got worldwide family all over the earth, and I worry about them all for whatever it's worth.
I'd like to introduce you to our moderator, Gabrielle Hibbert. Gabrielle has joined our team recently. She's from DC. She's getting a master's degree in Sustainable International Business and Development. And she's worked in business and finance international development previously. And we're very excited to have you as part of our team, Gabrielle, and to introduce our next panel asking a critical question: how can blockchain technology increase financial inclusion? So thanks, Gabby.
Thank you, Rhett, for the introduction, and thank you, Sean and Susie, for that wonderful discussion on offsetting carbon emissions and crypto exchanges. So joining our panel on how blockchain technology can increase financial inclusion, we have Gigi Gatti, William Lee, and Andre Sereno, as well as Natalia Thakor. Gigi Gatti is currently the Director of Technology for Development at the Grameen Foundation in DC. She has 25 years work experience in the IT, banking, insurance, and microfinance industries. She holds an MBA and a computer science degree. Will works on go-to-market and ecosystem development at C Labs, a project working on Cello. He has a background in finance and international development. Prior to Cello, Will was the country director for Give Directly Kenya and has spent time at the Gates Foundation and Bain Capital. Andre Sereno is the head of business development manager at the Electric Coin Company, the creators and developers of Zcash. In his current role, he helped launch Crypto in Context, a program to bring together crypto industry leaders and local communities for hands-on and collaborative learning, focused on cryptocurrency and financial education. Finally, we have Natalia Thakor. She's an IDO CoLab Fellow with the crypto startup Cello. She is also the co-founder and advisor to the Future of Digital Currency Initiative, a central bank digital currency partnership between Stanford and the United Nations. She's currently working towards an MBA MPA from the Stanford Graduate School of Business and Harvard Kennedy School. I'm so happy to meet with all of you, and I'm excited to get into this discussion that is very near and dear to my heart, having worked in international development as well as finance. So our objective here in about 30 minutes will be to kind of discuss the challenges and roadblocks that we see in blockchain technology's potentiality for increasing financial inclusion. And to kind of kick this off, I would love to hear how that has looked in your work, Gigi. If you can hear me.
Yes, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I was trying to put my video on, but I guess I'm not sure if that's coming through as well, or if that's even relevant at all for people to see. But anyway, thank you so much. And it's really very exciting for me to be in this panel. Financial inclusion has been the core of my work for the last, I would say, at least 20 years. And I know that we have very little time, and this is really a topic that is very close to my heart, you know. And I would just like to share one major key point, you know, from the perspective of use case for development, you know. Financial inclusion normally means that individuals and businesses have access to useful and affordable financial products and services, yeah? And we all know that in the last decade or so, many governments, you know, have launched, you know, different ways, you know, to increase the number of banked adults, you know, or bank accounts in their own countries. So even now, you know, as that global initiative has grown, and about 69% globally, according to the World Bank, we have adults that are owning bank accounts. The problem lies in the fact that these bank accounts remain to be very difficult and expensive to access for day-to-day and very small transactions. So what we've seen is that the most pressing challenge is that most of these accounts remain dormant, are not practical at all, and of little use for providing a financial profile of the account holder. Like, let me illustrate my point by giving you a hypothetical scenario, which is to us a day-to-day scenario in our work, right? So take the case of a smallholder farmer. Let's say the farmer's transactional activities, like purchasing of inputs and getting sales from their produce, are paid partially in cash or even mobile money in some countries. Now the farmer needs to apply for credit and is asked for proof of transactional activity. For the farmer to do this, he needs to combine manual receipts, if at all, show a record of mobile money transactions, if that is easy to do at all. And at the end of the day, a lot of this proof may or may not be considered authentic by the prospective creditor. So at the risk of oversimplifying the issue and the opportunity, involving blockchain use, having easy and undisputable access to one's financial footprint is very critical to unlocking access to microcredit. This is where blockchain can be most relevant for the underserved, making them and their transactions visible and the opportunity to access this data when they need to, having ownership of that data, being able to pull that data when they need, and knowing that these records will not be disputed at all. So this alone, one use case, will change the end game. The cost of giving and accessing microcredit will collapse, and we all know what positive things can happen if we are able to do that. Better interest rates can result in better repayment rates, and the cycle can go on and on.
Awesome.
And finally, the word blockchain scares so many. When we talk to microfinance institutions, to farmer cooperatives, never even talk about blockchain. There is a perception that it is too technical, it will be expensive, and that it is beyond the capacity of normal organizations to use. As an industry, we need to correct that. We should soften the technical language and focus on the use cases and what it is trying to solve. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Gigi, for that. Will, do you have anything to add from your work at Cello?
Yeah, for sure. First, thank you for having me on this panel. And I echo a lot of what Gigi has said. I think it's very, very resonant. So I think the question that I was asked was, what are the major challenges to broader adoption for financial inclusion around blockchain technology? And the points I'm hoping to make are twofold. One is the opportunity is often greatest in emerging markets, right? Like right now, I have a dozen different ways that I could use to send money from myself to a friend. And that's not the case in a lot of frontier markets. Not only is access an issue, but in our user research, when we were talking to some folks around the world, they said that even if they were able to gather all the documents and all the identification necessary to say start a bank account, they could walk into a branch and the bank teller might not serve them because it's not worth their time, right? And so those gatekeepers are actually really, really crucial in the existing system. But our hope is, like with blockchain, just like with off-grid solar or with mobile money, without having that kind of incumbent technology in place, you can leapfrog in a lot of these places and provide a valuable service to those who are just basically underserved. So the opportunity is really great, but I would consider one of the biggest barriers to mainstream adoption, especially by a more underbanked population, is usability. So like a lot of what Gigi said, there are just so many frictions. When you think about the path to adoption, there are like multiple stages that a user needs to go through in order to start using a new technology, from like comprehension to awareness to kind of just getting through those hurdles. And we are, as a sector, kind of bad at all of them. Like when you think about it, like we are not great at explaining blockchain. We're not great at providing on-ramps. There's just so many hurdles that somebody who might not have digital access to financial tools need to overcome in order to use it. But in general, I'm very, very hopeful. I would consider where we are as a sector very early days. We're in the early innings, like when C's first came, very unusable and only kind of reserved for a small cohort of people, and now like they're toddlers using iPads. And so I'm very hopeful that like we can get there, but it's going to be kind of a journey. And I think that what's important is when we're designing solutions, to design with the folks in mind, right? Like I imagine that most people on this call are fairly tech literate, like we all can use Zoom, which is like a big step up from what most people in the world have access to. And so it's important, if we're really going to solve user needs, to think about very marginalized and different contexts. And so, like in the minute or so I have left, I want to talk about like an example. We actually had the opportunity to go to Tanzania into a refugee camp with the World Food Program at one point and did research with refugees. And some of the assumptions that we had going in were just kind of blown away a little bit based on that user research. For instance, like we read on paper that the average download speeds were like 8 Mbps. And so with that in mind, we're like, okay, this could work because that kind of fits the scope or the specs of our technology. But in actuality, 8 was just an average, and the real on the ground scenario was like the download speeds would range from 2 to like 12, and that varied based on weather and just like a bunch of other factors. And so it's just one of those realities where if we really want to solve this need for financial inclusion, you have to get on the ground and just do a lot more research and design with users, or else you're going to miss the mark a little bit. And so I would say very excited for broader adoption, but I think we have some work to do.
Yeah, thank you for your remarks. Andre, would you have anything to add based on your work at Zcash and other initiatives?
Yeah, sure thing. So thank you for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here. And I agree with a lot of what Will and Gigi have already talked about. So I think about financial inclusion as really providing access to economic systems is really that bridge that provides additional opportunity for upwards mobility and improved economic outcomes for people, the goals of which are really having the ability to accumulate long-term wealth and savings, having a safe and affordable means to make everyday payments, having access to credit and insurance to hedge against key risks. And so I think that when you look at some of the innovation that's happening in this space, it can certainly be a really effective tool to achieve some of those outcomes. We're seeing a ton of innovation in decentralized finance and automating really key tasks to make credit more accessible to people and reduce some of the barriers for getting access to financial services. At ECC, we're focused on developing Zcash, which is designed to be a fair and open currency that has some characteristics that I think are really well suited to meet the evolving needs of people around the world. But I think that there are a lot of challenges. I think that Will really nailed it, talking about usability and accessibility. I think that as an industry, we tend to do a really poor job of making these topics accessible to the average person. We tend to talk in a lot of jargon and overly complicated topics that to the average person that is unbanked or underbanked, it just tends to go over their head, and they tend to like tune out a little bit, because to be honest, if you're in that situation, you are likely living paycheck to paycheck, or you may be a rural farmer, like Will mentioned in that example, and you're focused on how can you provide for your family month over month, and how you're going to pay your rent. And so we just need to do a better job of making the industry and technology more accessible to the average person. And so a lot of the ways that ECC is doing that. So Gabby, you mentioned that we launched a program called Crypto in Context, and the overarching idea for this is to provide a sort of bidirectional engagement for people in underserved communities. And so the way the model works is basically by working with community leaders around the world. And so we've worked with people in the South Bronx, students at the University of Lagos, Nigeria, and this program is able to provide a degree of access that would be really hard for our community to achieve without that. The one thing that I would push back a little bit that Will said is that
Andre,
there is not. Oh yeah, am I over?
I do want to bring in Natalia for roundup, but please do link the information for that initiative that you have. It would be lovely to see that and the audience interact with Crypto in Context. So Natalia, I want to give you the last minute to talk about your initiatives that you've been working on.
Yeah, so I've been working a lot in central bank digital currencies, which are essentially stable coins that would be issued by a central bank. And I feel like the three big problems we are kind of looking at is sort of like the payments ecosystem as it stands today, the lack of financial history and digital identities in communities, and then also like finance in the post-COVID world. So I'll talk a little bit about those three. So on the payments ecosystem side, CBDC can help make the system not as reliant on intermediaries. You can have a central point of access and one unit of account that makes it really easy to sort of like use and trade and transfer international payments. On the financial history and digital identity side, CBDC accounts themselves, like you don't need a bank account to have one, but the CBDC account on your mobile phone works as a digital identity for people who are excluded from private institutions. And it's also another way for them to start to build credit history and enter the financial system. And then also create shared data standards across government services, because now the government can sort of like work with citizens to have a better relationship in terms of how they're tracking different data points around transactions and money. And then I think in the post-COVID world, we're seeing that CBDC could be a really good idea for direct engagement, like thinking about like direct stimulus packages or negative interest rates, reducing the costs and time for government to support and reach people. Or you could have targeted response where governments could actually help historically marginalized and oppressed communities with like specific like financial or like fiscal policies that would be targeted through the use of CBDC. And then lastly, because everyone's using CBDC on their mobile phone, this would actually reduce the dependency on in-person interactions and the need to like go to the bank, take out money, no matter like what the transaction amount is. And so it actually supports like network effects that way.
Awesome. I have really enjoyed all of what you all have said. And I think one thing that I may want to kind of push you all a little bit on is this idea of maybe even thinking outside of the box when you're thinking about financial inclusion and blockchain tech. Does anyone, have anything that they'd like to share where they have thought outside the box within this realm? Andre, maybe?
Can you repeat the question, Gabrielle?
Sure. So we've thought about this idea of financial inclusion being a way in which we're trying to reach a bunch of populations, right? We have a lot of underbanked communities and areas that need to be reached. And there's an idea that blockchain itself is something that is a new technology that is out of the box, right? So when thinking about financial inclusion and blockchain, are there initiatives that any of you have worked on that have kind of been more on the creative side that have included the context in those communities that you've worked with?
Yeah, sure. I can take that one. So what I was about to talk about briefly was just the Crypto in Context program, which is designed to provide direct engagement between the crypto industry and local communities. So the way the model works is basically to partner with local community leaders that provide access to underserved communities that many people in the crypto industry otherwise would not really have a way to reach. And I think that one important thing to note that's been one of my biggest takeaways is that this process cannot just be unilateral. Otherwise, it is likely to fail, frankly. I think that part of what has made this program unique is that it focuses on bidirectional engagement. And so I think it's important for people that are in underserved communities to understand how cryptocurrency is relevant to their daily lives. And the bidirectional aspect is that, frankly, it provides a channel to speak with the industry and for them to design tools that really meet the needs of the people that we're trying to solve this problem for.
Awesome. Will, do you have anything to jump
there? Yeah. I think it's a really great question, and I think what's important to realize is like the adoption of cryptocurrency and digital assets is never really the end goal, right? It's a means to achieve, to fill a need, right? And so we should never kind of like lose sight of that. Some of the cool projects that we've worked on, working on Zello, have been around using technology to enable things that were possible before. And so one example is we went to Kenya and did this project around microwork, because one of the areas where Zello technology kind of really excels relative to the existing technologies is around cross-border micropayments. And so using our technology, we were able to allow folks to use their mobile phones to kind of earn cryptocurrency through micro work. So like small tasks that you would do, kind of like filling out CAPTCHAs, et cetera, et cetera. And through there, they were able to earn like a supplementary income, which is really important in like COVID times where people are like stuck at home and they've lost their employment. And so kind of thinking about that, right? Because I think that's a big part of financial inclusion as well. Like it's hard to be financially included when you don't have income to kind of to focus on. And so I think that the making sure that whatever kind of technology or programs that you adapt are really filling a need that's prevalent and not kind of just like pushing something out there and hoping that adoption will come later, I think is going to be crucial.
Awesome. And Gigi, I know that you have done a lot of work within the development field. How has using blockchain kind of shifted or changed in that regard when adding that to the equation of financial inclusion?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Gabby, for that question. To be very honest, it's like still in the innovation phase, if I may put it that way, because for us to be able to complete the cycle, you need the whole ecosystem to be in it, right? I mean, you cannot just work on the level of, like, let's say the farmers or the micro entrepreneurs. You need to get involved, the financial service providers, you know, the ag input providers, and even the local community sometimes, you know, like for instance, we do work with savings groups. So, you know, and those are self-help groups. So you need to be able to understand all the players and all the possible use cases in the ecosystem. But what we have done recently, and thank you, Will, for saving this for me and not giving this as an example, is that in our recent collaboration with Cello, we were able to do humanitarian aid using microfinance institutions as a conduit to give COVID-19 related aid to the Philippines. And we were really not sure if this was going to work out. And just being able to explain to the microfinance community that this currency is backed by cryptocurrency and all that was really a big haul. But in the end, to cut the story short, we were able to do it. We were able to facilitate the different tranches of $100 basically aid to the Tello wallets. And right now we are seeing that these amounts are being used for groceries and for pharmaceutical items, which it was intended to be. So it's a really good story. We're very excited. The next step is to really hone in on the business case, which to me is the most important part of this exercise. Because without the business case and without knowing all of the charges and all of the fees involved, you know, it's very difficult to sell the proposition of using cryptocurrency-backed blockchain channels. And so we are excited to be looking at the business case, and we are committed to really put the costs down and make this work for the underserved. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we still have about 6 more minutes to kind of talk through some final points. I do want to wrap it up a little bit for the audience and have time for questions. If anyone has any, please put them in the chat. I'm sure my panelists would love to answer that. But to wrap up, we have discussed that financial inclusion means thinking outside of that box, getting creative when you're talking to communities that are underbanked, and maybe thinking about the context in which you are shaping your use case. Including usability and interface as a principle, and making DeFi accessible. And lastly, asking the question of who are we actually designing this for? So I guess my final question for any of you is, you know, DeFi started out as a project that, you know, it wanted to do what we're trying to shape right here in our panel, right? And I think right now DeFi is becoming less and less accessible. How do you answer that question of making it kind of go back to square one and bringing in people that need that extra push to be, you know, financially secure?
I can maybe like take a quick stab at this one. And this is like totally personal opinion, I think sort of the financial inclusion work is even a little bit of like a different strain than DeFi. I see DeFi as the current financial system kind of digitally mapped over to the crypto system, where the people who are playing in it it's like a pretty exclusive group. Like you have to kind of know the rules. These different like financial products are getting built just in the crypto world, and they can be extremely risky and volatile, versus a lot of the financial inclusion work we've talked about uses a different part of the crypto and blockchain ecosystem to make that work happen. And so in the same way, in the real world, as we have like the financial ecosystem, and then we have all these amazing organizations doing financial inclusion work, that's sort of how I map it into the crypto world. And so the only difference is like the underlying technology that is fueling it is different.
Yeah, definitely. Andre seemed to be nodding along. Do you have anything to add to what Natalia was saying?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I was thinking about something that Gigi was saying, which is focusing on the business case here, which I think is a really important point that I just want to underscore. There's a saying that for innovative technology to stick, there has to be a 10x improvement in the legacy products that existed there, and I think that's 100% the case. And so when we're looking at the sort of systems that we're disrupting here, where can we really provide the most value and demonstrate that in a way that is compelling for like existing businesses to go in and like offer those sorts of services to people. And I think that a few examples come to mind for me, which is one is the work that Square Cash App has been doing. They've been posting pretty outstanding revenue growth month over month by providing Bitcoin services and reducing the need for people to have like actual bank accounts. And so it I think is a strong example that investing in crypto infrastructure can be a very profitable value proposition for people for companies to offer that can also improve access to financial services for the unbanked and underbanked.
Awesome, thank you. Well, we have a panel coming up at 2:25 that will kind of answer this question for blockchain for everyone. And to wrap up, I would love each of you to drop in the chat where people can find you, where they can find your work. And I am going to hand it off to the next panel if there are no underlying questions. Thank you so much, Gigi, Will, Andre, and Natalia for your insight. I had a wonderful time talking to you guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Bye.
Everybody down